Hello, our Axis and allies loves. It's 1914 World War I. Wars of the World, straight from the nest. NATO's going to take it away.
Hello everybody, this is Nato at the Nest with the spring of the 1916 turn of World War I. And starting off, Austria didn't make any attacks this turn. All it did was it used the railways to pull troops off the Eastern Front with Russia and move them to Italy to reinforce the Italian front, because last attack had depleted the Austrian forces enough to warrant a redeployment. Otherwise the Austrians would be pushed out of northern Italy. There are Austrian troops on the Russian border. They're just sitting up there on the blow-up. And that was it for Austria. They've completed interrupted gear. Actually, everyone has completed the interrupted gear, so now finally fighters will be able to dogfight and shoot each other down. Germany continued its Zeppelin raids on London, did 7 damage on the factory. If you're wondering how the Germans hit Paris, they brought in a new weapon, a German unique weapon, the Paris gun. Basically that is just a giant cannon that took up 2 whole rail lines to move and operate, and could lob a shell somewhere between 70 and 100 miles. So how that works gameplay wise is that monstrosity of a cannon can shoot into an adjacent territory, not just the territory it's in. You can get that piece from historicalboardgaming.com, and for a strategic level game like this, it adds a very useful tool to the German arsenal. And as you know, bombers have been quasi-invented by now, but in terms of bombers that were actually big enough to carry a large enough payload to actually affect anything, those haven't been invented yet. So the only way to get at another nation's production is the Paris gun and Zeppelins. So in a strategic level game like this, going after your opponent's production is the key to victory. So the Germans used the Paris gun for the first time and managed to do 6 points of damage. The convoys didn't do so well, or the convoy raiders I should say, didn't do so well this turn. Altogether they only managed to get 3 points of damage. So England loses $3 and America goes up by 3 production wise. And their convoy raiders in the Pacific, or I should say convoy raider, only had 1 left, didn't hit anything in the Pacific. And so ground wise, Germany didn't do anything in the west, just holding territory, because its main focus is in the east. That's where the vast majority of German victory points come from. So they made 3 advances into Russia. They attacked Lithuania again, but the Russian trenches there are holding strong. The Germans weren't able to penetrate. Further south they had success though. They took Warsaw, so Warsaw has fallen, and that territory just north of Warsaw, which I can't remember the name of, they took that. They took that without a fight. The Russians didn't have any forces there. And that is it for the German turn. So then England remember from last video I said England and France have completed the research on tanks and the interrupter gear. So tanks, as you can see, the German Mark 4, I want to say, maybe? The German. Sorry, the English Mark 4 tank has made its debut on the board. And so it's probably, maybe the next turn we'll see those in its first action. England didn't attack anywhere on the Western Front, opting to wait for the tanks to be brought online before they make an attack, because the special ability of the tank is it can cancel out a hit equal to the number of tanks. So British figured it'd be wiser to wait for the tanks to come online to save some troops, and also the interrupter gear the British now have the interrupter gear, so now the British Air Force can challenge the German and bring a more even fight to the playing field. The one place the British did attack was they finally attacked and took the German South Africa colony. And that was it for... oh, sorry. No, that wasn't it for England. You remember last turn I mentioned that the Irish have rebelled. They rolled a 2, so they got 2 infantry. So the British, they took an infantry from London and the cavalry from southern England, loaded up on a transport and landed it to join up with the infantry already there, and brought a battleship and a cruiser along as escort, and in case those German subs try to go north. And they managed to get 1 hit on the Irish rebels, so they reduced them down to 1. The Irish didn't get a hit in return, they missed everything. And then the British took an infantry and an artillery from Calcutta, loaded up and landed it to reinforce the Ottoman front, and then moved its fighter from Oman over to Yemen to try to get it in the fight somewhere. And then that was it for the British. Anzac, they bought a transport, so now they have 2 transports getting geared up to head somewhere. Technology-wise, the British have completed the research on convoys, so now next turn the British can reorganize their merchant vessels into the convoy system, which does 2 things. It negates the +1 bonus for the convoy rolls that the German submarines give, so it'll just be a straight D6 versus D6 roll with no modifiers from now on. And it unlocks destroyers. The British will now be able to build destroyers to hunt down those German subs. As well as the interrupter gear and tanks. So the next turn, the British will be able to start constructing the mines. And if you know any history of World War I, the British, one of its big industries was coal mining, which was all done underground. So someone in Britain had this wonderful idea that to try tunneling under the German trenches. And when they asked, well, who was going to do the tunneling, they came up with another bright idea, and someone said, well, we have all these coal miners back in the home country that are, all they do is dig underground, so why don't we bring them over and dig the tunnels for us? And so that's what they did. They brought all these coal miners from the coal fields in England, brought them to the Western Front, had them tunnel under the German trench lines, and once they were underneath the German trenches, they filled the tunnels with explosives and blew the holy living hell out of the German trenches. So the British next turn will now be able to utilize that sneaky tactic. And that was it for the British. French had a limited turn conflict-wise, as at least on the Western Front they're more or less doing what the British were doing, is waiting. Now that they have tanks online and the interrupter gear, they're holding off on attacking until the tanks could get online. That Paris gun hitting the French factory hurt them a little. It limited how many tanks they could buy. They only had enough money to buy a single tank. As you can see, we got the Renault model right there. Once again, you can get that at historicalboardgaming.com. France's one action was in Togoland, where the two French infantry and the French Foreign Legion infantry once again tried to drive the Germans out of Togoland, but were unsuccessful again. Other than that, that was it for France. Just continued to reinforce the Western Front, brought the other two Foreign Legion troops up into the front line. And that was it for France. Russia, same as always, didn't attack anything. It's just trying to stitch together a front line. As you can see, they got the makings of a front line, starting with Lithuania and then stretching down to Kiev. Just trying to hold the front line and trying to limit their casualties, but the Germans aren't giving them the breathing room. The Russians are already up to 27 casualties. If you remember, they only need 35 to trigger the October Revolution and the Bolshevik takeover, and consequently the Russian Civil War. So, despite Russia's best interests, it looks like Russia's heading to utter chaos and civil war, which will play into the Central Powers' favor, because that will knock Russia out of the war and condense it down to a one-front war for Germany and the Austrians too as well. See, then and then the Ottomans, they had two fights. Remember the Arab Revolt in the Hejaz, which diverted reinforcements away from the Cairo front. The Ottomans had to divert troops to deal with the rebellion. They were successful and wiped it out, so Hejaz is back in the Ottoman hands. Despite not getting any reinforcements, the Ottomans attacked Cairo anyways, and it ended in a draw. The Italians had moved their Kufra forces over into Cairo to help their British allies, and the British and the Italians lost 2 and the Ottomans lost 2, so it was a draw. The Ottomans used poison gas, as you can see in the marker there. Germans also used poison gas for the fight for Warsaw and in Lithuania. And then that was it for the Ottomans. Just continuing to move forces down. Then the Italians, they moved their Tripoli forces over to Cairo to help reinforce, and they attacked the Austrians in the Alps again, used poison gas. Italians didn't have creeping barrage yet. I actually forgot to check to see if they hit the benchmark this turn or not. But they caused 5 casualties. The Austrians have a hospital there, and the Austrians lucked out, and when they did their wounded roll, every single one came up wounded, so they'll get all 5 of those casualties back when the next turn starts. Then, Japan, the Japanese Navy has destroyed the last German cruiser in the Pacific, and the Japanese Army has taken the last garrisoned island, took the Carolinas. So, the Germans still have Panapi and Palau, but they're not garrisoned, so the Japanese can take those at their leisure. So, more or less, the Germans have been completely pushed out of the Pacific. And so, probably from this point on, the Japanese are probably just going to be taking its entire production and leasing it to its allies. Then America, it can intervene in the Mexican Civil War, and this turn, and it chose to do so because for every unit next turn, for every unit America has in Mexico, it'll get a 1 IPP bonus, one-time bonus to spend next turn, because the turn after next, America enters the war. So that's the incentive for America to intervene. They attacked the Mexican rebels and caused 3 casualties for 2 of their own. So America's had its first combat of the game. Not anywhere near where it matters or the important fight, but at least they get to do something. I think I explained the concept behind the bonus that America gets for the troops in Mexico. I think I did. If I didn't, the reasoning is our intervention in the Mexican Civil War in 1916. It taught the leadership like Pershing and Patton and MacArthur, and scores of other officers. It taught them the shortcomings of American logistics. The logistical plan that they had in place was utterly inadequate to supply a large army on the move. And so the lessons learned for the deployment into Mexico carried forward about a year later when America entered World War I. Those lessons learned from Mexico allowed the American army to mobilize a lot quicker than it would have been without the experience gained in Mexico. So the way I figure to represent that in a board game is, America gets that IPP bonus for every unit it has in Mexico to simulate that more efficient logistics. And that was the turn. So what happening next turn is Romania, right there, will be joining on the Entente side, and it'll be controlled by Russia. So Romania joins, and for the most part, all the technologies have been unlocked. Everyone has the interrupter gear now, so all the fighters are true fighters now. Most everybody, I think there's 1 or 2 that don't have poison gas. There's a couple that don't have the creeping barrage. But tanks are unlocked. The British have their convoy systems running. So that gap between offense and defense is closing every turn. So we'll probably see a renewal of offensives on the Western Front by the Entente, and Russia just got trying to hold on for dear life. So we'll come back with the fall of 1916. See you then.
Hi, Axis and Allies players, and thanks for watching The Nest. Like what we're doing, go ahead and hit a squat on that like button. Share it to your favorite social media. Want to see more videos just like this? Go ahead and subscribe. We'll have more coming to you right from Original Axis and Allies from Milton Bradley, Axis and Allies in 1914 by Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, Shapeways.com, and HistoricalBoardGaming.com, where you can find all of your expansions and other pieces right there online ready for you. We'll see you next time right here, straight from the nest.